At 2:47 p.m. on December 18, 1944, Technical Sergeant William Harrison crouched in a frozen clearing in the Ardennes Forest, watching 240 wounded American soldiers prepare to die following orders. The clearing was 3 miles behind what used to be American lines before the Germans shattered them 72 hours earlier. Now the lines didn't exist, just scattered units, broken communications, and men bleeding in the snow. Harrison was 28 years old, 5 feet 10 inches, 163 pounds. Brown hair going grey at the temples, hands that shook slightly when he wasn't working. He'd been a combat medic for 17 months. Landed at Normandy on June 13, 1944, D+7. He'd kept men alive through hedgerow fighting, through the drive across France, through 2 months of forest combat that turned the Ardennes into an abattoir. He was good at keeping men alive. The problem was getting them out afterward. An artillery shell landed 800 yards down the forest road. The impact shook snow from pine branches. Harrison watched an American ambulance explode. The vehicle lifted off the ground, hung suspended for half a second, came apart in mid-air. Pieces of metal and canvas scattered across frozen earth. 6 more medics dead. That made 11 today. All killed trying to evacuate wounded soldiers along Route Charlie, the only road on the maps, the only approved evacuation route. Command said Route Charlie was the only way out. German artillery said otherwise. The Germans had been hammering Route Charlie for 6 hours straight, 1 shell every 90 seconds, methodical, precise, killing anyone stupid enough to use the road the maps said they should use. Harrison's radio crackled. Major Robert Kessler's voice, tight with stress. All units, evacuate via Route Charlie. Medical transport departing at 1500 hours. No alternatives authorized. Harrison looked at the 240 wounded soldiers lying in the clearing, looked at the forest behind them, saw something no one else could see. The Battle of the Bulge had started 3 days earlier, December 16, 1944. 3 German Panzer divisions smashed through the Ardennes sector with 240,000 men and over 1,000 tanks. The offensive caught American forces completely unprepared. The Ardennes was supposed to be a quiet sector, good place for green divisions to get combat experience, good place for exhausted divisions to rest. The 99th Infantry Division held 16 miles of front line when the Germans attacked. Within 12 hours, the division was scattered across 30 square miles of forest, communications destroyed, supply lines severed. Battalion-sized units reduced to company-sized fragments. By December 18th, thousands of American soldiers were cut off behind German lines. Medical units faced impossible choices. Stay and be captured, or evacuate through roads that German artillery had turned into killing zones. American medical evacuation doctrine was clear. Wounded soldiers evacuated along designated military roads. These roads were chosen by staff officers studying maps in rear headquarters. Engineers evaluated the roads for vehicle capacity, surface quality, grade percentages. Cartographers verified the roads appeared on standard military maps. Logistics officers calculated travel times and fuel consumption. The doctrine made sense in theory. Standardization allowed coordination. Predictability enabled planning. If every unit followed the same procedures, command could manage evacuation operations across entire army groups. But the doctrine had one fatal flaw. It was predictable. German intelligence had captured American planning documents during fighting near Aachen in November 1944. The documents included evacuation route designations for the entire Ardennes sector. The Germans knew exactly where American wounded would be moved. They positioned 88mm and 105mm artillery batteries to interdict those routes. Pre-sighted coordinates. Pre-calculated firing solutions. Just wait for American convoys and destroy them systematically. Between December 16th and December 18th, medical convoys attempting evacuation along doctrinal routes suffered 42% casualty rates, 67 ambulances destroyed, 89 medics killed. Wounded soldiers who survived initial combat were dying during evacuation. The system designed to save lives was killing them faster than German infantry. Command's response was to accelerate evacuation timing, move faster, get through the killing zones before German artillery could adjust fire. But speed didn't matter when Germans had every route pre-sighted. The shells didn't care how fast you drove. Harrison had grown up in Ironwood, Michigan, timber country. His father, Marcus Harrison, worked as a logging foreman for 32 years. Started as a sawyer at age 16. Worked his way up through every position in timber operations. By the time William was born in 1916, Marcus Harrison knew the northern forests better than most men knew their own neighborhoods. William grew up in logging camps. Learned to read forests the way other children learned to read books. Could identify tree species by bark texture in complete darkness. Understood how water moved through terrain by observing moss patterns. Knew where trails would be by studying how trees grew. Loggers didn't build trails the way engineers built roads. Loggers followed the terrain. Found natural paths through dense growth. Created routes that outsiders would never see because the routes didn't look like roads. They looked like forest. But they were there. Compressed soil beneath undergrowth. Strategic clearing between dense growth. Subtle grade. Management that allowed timber drag without excessive effort. Harrison's father taught him the first principle of timber work. Trees don't lie about where they'll let you pass. When Pearl Harbor happened, Harrison was working as a forestry technician for the Michigan Department of Conservation. He enlisted September 1942. Army wanted him for engineering corps. He requested medical training. Had experience treating logging injuries, crushed limbs, chainsaw lacerations, men pinned under falling timber. He knew how to keep people alive when hospitals were 50 miles away. The Army assigned him to medical corps, trained him at Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, shipped him to England in May 1944. He landed at Normandy, June 13th, attached to the 99th Infantry Division. 17 months of combat, Normandy hedgerows, the drive through France, the German border, the Ardennes Forest. Harrison saw more death than any civilian should witness in 10 lifetimes, but he also saw patterns. Saw how doctrine killed men when terrain offered better options. July 1944, Normandy hedgerows. Harrison's company took casualties during fighting near Saint-Lô. 8 wounded soldiers needed evacuation. Company commander ordered evacuation via designated route, a farm road that appeared on all the maps. Harrison studied the terrain. Saw agricultural drainage ditches running parallel to the road. The ditches would provide cover, would allow movement without exposure to German observation. He suggested the alternate route. Company commander rejected it. Follow doctrine. Use approved roads. The evacuation convoy used the farm road. German forces had observed American evacuation patterns. They knew which roads Americans would use. They waited in ambush. 8 wounded soldiers died. All of them killed during evacuation. All of them died following protocol. September 1944, near Aachen. 14 wounded soldiers in medical convoy. Designated evacuation route ran along a ridgeline road. Good road. Engineered surface. Wide enough for two-way traffic. Appeared on every map. Harrison identified a parallel farm track. Narrow. Unpaved. Not on military maps. But it ran through a valley below the ridgeline. Would be invisible to German artillery observers. Command rejected the alternate route. Not on the maps. Not authorized. Follow doctrine. German Nebelwerfer rocket barrage destroyed the entire convoy. 14 wounded soldiers dead. The farm track went unused. By December 1944, Harrison had watched 34 men die during evacuations. 34 men he'd kept alive through combat. Lost because military doctrine valued maps over terrain. Valued standardization over survival. Valued predictability over effectiveness. Harrison knew the doctrine was wrong, knew it was killing his patients, but he was a technical sergeant, an enlisted medic. He didn't make doctrine, he followed it. Until December 18th, 1944, when following doctrine meant watching 240 more men die. 2 days earlier, during a brief lull in the fighting, Harrison had scouted the forest around the aid station. Not because command ordered reconnaissance, because he was a logger's son and reading terrain was instinctive. He walked the perimeter, studied tree growth patterns, identified compressed soil beneath snow cover, found something, a gap in the dense evergreen growth, barely visible. Most people would walk past it without noticing, but Harrison recognized what it was. A skid trail, the kind loggers used to drag cut timber from forest to road. The trail was old. Probably hadn't been used since before the war. Belgium had extensive logging operations dating back 200 years. The Ardennes Forest was commercially harvested for centuries. Those old logging trails still existed, overgrown, forgotten, marked impassable on military maps because they couldn't accommodate vehicles. But Harrison didn't need to move vehicles. He needed to move wounded soldiers. He followed the trail for half a mile, confirmed it ran southeast, away from German artillery positions, toward American lines with the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The trail was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide, but wide enough for 2 men carrying a stretcher. He marked the route in his memory. Lightning struck oak at half a mile. Creek crossing at 1 mile. Moss-covered boulder formation at 1.5 miles. Natural landmarks that wouldn't change, that he could navigate by even in darkness. Then he returned to the aid station, considered whether to report the trail to command, decided against it. They'd reject it. Same reason they'd rejected every alternate route he'd ever suggested. Not on the maps, not approved, not doctrinal. But Harrison kept the trail in his mind, just in case. December 18th. The just in case became the only case. At 2:53 p.m., Harrison watched another ambulance explode en route Charlie. The vehicle was carrying 6 wounded soldiers, all dead now. The doctrine had killed them. He turned away from route Charlie, looked at the 240 wounded soldiers in the clearing, looked at the forest behind them, made a decision that would either save them or earn him a court-martial. Harrison walked to Major Robert Kessler's command post. Kessler was 41 years old, career officer, West Point graduate, believed in doctrine the way some men believed in religion. He stood over a map table, studying route Charlie, calculating convoy timing. Harrison saluted. "Sir, request permission to speak." Kessler didn't look up. "What is it, Sergeant?" "Route Charlie is compromised, sir. Germans have it pre-sighted. We've lost 11 medics today. 42% casualty rate for convoys. We need an alternate route." "There is no alternate route. Route Charlie is the designated evacuation route for this sector. Sir, there's a logging trail, runs southeast from our position." "Not on the maps. Germans don't know about it. I can move the wounded through the forest. Get them to the 507th lines. Zero exposure to German artillery." Kessler finally looked up. His face was exhausted. 3 days of combat without sleep. A logging trail. Not on the maps. "No, sir, but it's there. I've scouted it. If it's not on the maps, it doesn't exist for planning purposes. We follow doctrine, Sergeant. Route Charlie is our evacuation route." "Sir, Route Charlie is killing our men. Then we'll move faster. Convoy departs 1500 hours. Get the wounded ready for transport." Harrison stood silent for 3 seconds, calculated what he was about to do, calculated the consequences, then said, "Sir, there's another way. I've given you my orders, Sergeant. Route Charlie." Dismissed. Harrison saluted, walked away. Knew he'd just had his last official conversation with Major Kessler for a while, because Harrison wasn't using route Charlie. He was using the trail that wasn't on the maps. The trail, the doctrine said, didn't exist. He was going to save 240 lives by disobeying orders. Trees don't lie about where they'll let you pass. And Harrison trusted trees more than he trusted doctrine. Harrison walked away from Major Kessler's command post, knowing he had maybe 30 minutes before anyone stopped him. 30 minutes to organize an evacuation that violated every regulation in the Army Medical Department field manual. 30 minutes to convince soldiers to follow him into a forest using a trail that officially didn't exist. He found Corporal James Mitchell first. Mitchell was 23 years old. Farm boy from Minnesota. Joined the army in 1942 after his older brother died at Guadalcanal. Mitchell had been with Harrison since Normandy, knew how to follow orders. Also knew when orders were wrong. Harrison pulled him aside. "I need volunteers. We're evacuating the wounded through the forest. Not using Route Charlie." Mitchell looked toward the command post. "Major Kessler approved this?" "Major Kessler ordered Route Charlie. I'm offering an alternative." Understanding crossed Mitchell's face. "So we're disobeying orders?" "I'm disobeying orders. You're volunteering for a hazardous mission." "Big difference." Mitchell grinned slightly. "What kind of hazardous mission?" 8 miles through unmapped forest, carrying wounded on improvised stretchers. No vehicles, no lights. Finish before dawn or German patrols will spot us. If the trail doesn't go where I think it goes, we'll be lost in enemy territory with 240 wounded soldiers and no backup plan. "When do we start?" Harrison found Private First Class Robert Chen next. Chen was 21, California, Berkeley forestry student before the war. Enlisted after his parents were sent to Manzanar internment camp. Chen understood forests, understood terrain reading. He'd survive if the trail failed. "I need someone who knows trees," Harrison said. Chen looked at him carefully. "What are we really talking about?" "Logging trail, southeast bearing, 8 miles to friendly lines, not on any maps." "And Command approved this?" "Command approved, Route Charlie. I'm implementing a tactical alternative at unit level." Chen smiled. "That's a nice way of saying mutiny. That's a nice way of saying I'm not watching any more men die following doctrine. You in or out? Show me the trail." Sergeant Thomas Bailey was the third volunteer. Maine, 31 years old. Hunting guide before the war. Knew how to move through forests without leaving trace. Knew how to navigate by stars and terrain features. Harrison explained the plan. Bailey listened without interrupting. When Harrison finished, Bailey asked one question. "You trust this trail?" "I trust what I saw. Compressed soil, strategic clearing, grade management. Decades, maybe longer. That's not what I asked. Do you trust it?" Harrison met his eyes. "I trust it more than Route Charlie." Bailey nodded. "Then, let's move." The four of them gathered in the clearing at 3:17 p.m. 240 wounded soldiers lay on the frozen ground. Some were conscious, some weren't. All of them were watching Route Charlie, watching the artillery impacts, calculating their chances of surviving evacuation. Harrison addressed the conscious wounded first. "I'm Technical Sergeant Harrison. I've been your medic for 7 months, kept most of you alive through situations that should have killed you. Now I'm asking you to trust me one more time. We're not using Route Charlie. We're using a forest trail. 8 miles. Hand-carried stretchers. No vehicles. No artillery cover. Just us and the forest. It's going to hurt. It's going to be cold. But you'll be alive at the end." One soldier, Private Eddie Morrison with a shattered leg, spoke up. "Doc, Major Kessler ordered Route Charlie." "You're disobeying orders." "That's correct. Why should we follow you instead of the Major?" "Because I grew up in forests, and the Major grew up reading maps. Maps show where engineers built roads. Forests show where people can actually walk. I'm following the forest." Morrison considered this, then nodded. "I'll take my chances with trees over artillery." Other wounded soldiers murmured agreement. They'd watched Route Charlie become a graveyard. They'd rather risk the unknown than face known death. Harrison and his 3 volunteers began constructing stretchers. They had no proper medical litters. Those had been destroyed or lost during the German breakthrough. They improvised. Rifle cleaning rods, tent poles, parachute material, shelter halves, anything that could form a frame and support weight. Mitchell demonstrated the construction technique. 2 tent poles for the frame, shelter half stretched between them. Secure with parachute cord at 6 points. Test weight before loading wounded. If it holds 200 pounds static, it'll hold 180 pounds moving. They built 40 stretchers in 37 minutes. Other soldiers noticed the activity. Word spread through the clearing. Doc Harrison has a plan, different from the major's orders. Some soldiers approached, asked questions. Private David Chen, no relation to Robert Chen, asked, "Sergeant, is it true you're using an unauthorized route?" "It's true, I'm using a route that's not on military maps. Whether it's unauthorized depends on whether you think maps define reality or reality defines maps. What if the route fails? What if we get lost? Then we improvise. But I've scouted the trail. I know where it goes. I'm betting my life on it, same as yours." 27 soldiers volunteered as stretcher bearers. Most were from the 99th Infantry Division, men who'd served with Harrison, men who trusted him. A few were from other units. They'd heard about Doc Harrison, the medic who never lost patients he could reach. If Harrison said there was a trail, they believed him. But not everyone volunteered. Sergeant William Foster refused. "Orders are orders," Major Kessler said. "Route Charlie. That's where I'm going." Harrison didn't argue. "That's your choice. Good luck." 12 soldiers followed Foster's lead. Decided to wait for the Route Charlie convoy. They'd rather face German artillery than disobey orders. Harrison understood. Some men couldn't function without doctrine, needed command structure, needed authorized procedures. The army trained that instinct. Sometimes it kept you alive, sometimes it killed you. At 3:48 p.m., Harrison organized the first group. 30 wounded soldiers, least critical injuries, men with single gunshot wounds, broken bones, second-degree burns. If the trail failed, these men had the best chance of surviving long enough for rescue. Mitchell and Robert Chen would lead the first group, 60 stretcher bearers. 10 soldiers for security. They'd make the initial run, confirm the trail worked, radio back confirmation or warning. Harrison briefed them one final time. Follow compass bearing 127 degrees. Southeast. You'll hit a lightning-struck oak at half a mile. Big tree, split trunk, you can't miss it. Creek crossing at 1 mile. Moss-covered boulders at 1.5 miles. Each landmark confirms you're en route. Trail ends at the 507th Parachute Infantry positions, maybe 3 miles beyond that. Medical station there can handle the wounded. Evacuate them to rear areas via secure routes. Mitchell checked his compass. 127 degrees. Got it. Chen studied the forest. What if we encounter German patrols? Stay quiet. Stay low. Germans are watching roads, not forest trails. They don't expect Americans where roads don't go. And if they spot us anyway? Harrison handed him a flare. "Fire this. I'll bring everyone. We'll fight our way out, together or die together. But don't fire unless you have no choice. Flare will compromise the trail for everyone behind you." Chen pocketed the flare, nodded. At 3:52 p.m., the first group prepared to depart. Harrison double-checked every stretcher, verified every wounded soldier was secured. Verified stretcher bearers understood hand signals for silent communication. Major Kessler appeared at the edge of the clearing. His face was red, angry. He'd heard about Harrison's preparations. Understood what was happening. "Harrison! What the hell are you doing?" Harrison turned, kept his voice level. "Saving lives, sir. I ordered evacuation via Route Charlie. Route Charlie is killing our men, sir. We're taking an alternate route." "There is no alternate route. I'm looking at the map right now." Kessler held up a military topographic map. "Show me this trail." Harrison gestured toward the forest. "It's not on the map, sir." "If it's not on the map, it doesn't exist." "Sir, I've scouted it. The trail exists. It's been there longer than the maps have." Kessler's voice rose. That's a direct order, Sergeant. Route Charlie. Now. Harrison looked at the major, looked at the 240 wounded soldiers, looked at Route Charlie, where another artillery shell had just landed, made his choice. No, sir. The words hung in frozen air. Nearby soldiers stopped moving, stopped breathing. Everyone understood what had just happened. Direct refusal of a lawful order from a superior officer during combat operations. Article 90 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Court-martial offence. Possible execution. But Harrison had watched 34 men die following orders. He wouldn't watch 240 more. Kessler's face went from red to white. You're relieved of duty, Sergeant. Consider yourself under arrest. Arrest me after we get these men to safety, sir. Harrison turned away, signalled Mitchell and Chen. The first group of 30 wounded soldiers disappeared into the forest. 100 men moving into darkness, into terrain that wasn't on any map, following a medic who'd just committed mutiny. Kessler stood speechless. Several officers had gathered behind him. Lieutenant William Parker, Captain James Rodriguez. They watched Harrison's group vanish into the trees, watched the clearing empty as unauthorized evacuation proceeded. Parker stepped forward. Young lieutenant, 24 years old, Cornell graduate. Smart enough to recognize when doctrine failed. I'll go with the second group, Major. If Harrison's wrong, court-martial us both. Kessler turned on him. You're willing to disobey orders too? I'm willing to save 240 lives, sir. If that requires disobeying orders, then yes. Rodriguez spoke up. Major, Route Charlie has a 42% casualty rate. Harrison's offering an alternative. Maybe we should let him try. Kessler looked at his officers, looked at the wounded soldiers, looked at Route Charlie, where smoke rose from 3 destroyed ambulances. Made a calculation. If Harrison succeeded, 240 men survived. If Harrison failed, well, Harrison was already under arrest. The responsibility would be his. You have until 0600 hours, Harrison. Kessler's voice was controlled now. Professional. If you're not back with confirmation that trail works, I'm sending MPs after you. And if any of those wounded die because of your insubordination, I'll personally ensure you hang. Harrison nodded. Began organizing the second group. The first group moved through forest in gathering darkness. December sun set early. By 4:30 p.m., they were navigating through twilight. Mitchell led. Chen walked 10 paces behind, verifying landmarks. The trail was exactly where Harrison described. Narrow gap between dense evergreen growth, maybe 4 feet wide, trees cleared in a strategic pattern. Wide enough for timber drag, not wide enough for vehicles. Why military engineers had dismissed it. Couldn't move trucks, couldn't move jeeps, couldn't move artillery, but stretchers fit perfectly. The group moved in single file. 2 stretcher bearers, 1 wounded soldier, repeat. 30 wounded meant 60 bearers plus 10 security. 100 men threading through forest in near silence. Only sounds were boots on frozen ground. Occasional grunt of effort. Quiet breathing. Mitchell counted paces. Navigation backup in case the compass failed. At 470 paces, he spotted the lightning-struck oak. Big tree. Split trunk. Exactly where Harrison said. Chen examined the tree. This was struck recently. Maybe 5 years ago. Still alive, though. Oak's tough. They continued. At 930 paces, they reached the creek crossing. Frozen solid, they crossed without incident. At 1,400 paces, the moss-covered boulders appeared. Large formation. 4 rocks arranged in a rough square. Moss on north-facing. Sides confirmed orientation. Mitchell keyed his radio. Whispered. Landmarks confirmed. Route accurate. Continuing to objective. Back at the clearing, Harrison received the message at 5:23 p.m. Felt tension ease slightly. The trail was real. The landmarks were accurate. First validation that his memory matched reality. But the mission was far from over. First group still had 3 miles to go. 7 more groups waited, and German forces were everywhere in these forests. At 5:37 p.m., Mitchell's group heard German voices, 200 yards west, patrol moving parallel to their route. Mitchell signaled halt. 100 men froze. Some wounded soldiers grimaced in pain but stayed silent. They understood. Sound meant death. The German patrol passed. 8 soldiers. Systematic search pattern. Looking for American stragglers. Looking for evacuation convoys on known routes. Not looking at impassable logging trails. The patrol moved away. Mitchell waited 5 full minutes. Verified the Germans were gone. Group continued. At 6:15 p.m., they emerged from forest at American lines. 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment positions. Sentries challenged them. Mitchell gave recognition signal. They were passed through. Medical station was established 400 yards behind front lines. Doctors and nurses waited. Supplies available. Evacuation to rear hospitals possible via secure routes that German artillery couldn't reach. Mitchell reported to the medical officer. 30 wounded from 99th Infantry. Evacuated via alternate route. More groups coming. Need to keep reception clear. The medical officer stared. You came through the forest? How? There are no trails. There's a trail. Just not on your maps, Mitchell radioed Harrison. First group through. Trail works. Landmarks accurate. Route secure. Ready for next group. Harrison received confirmation at 6:22 p.m. Turned to Major Kessler. The Major had been standing nearby. Watching. Waiting. First group through, sir. 30 men safe. 0 casualties during movement. Kessler said nothing, but his face revealed internal conflict. Doctrine said Harrison was wrong. Reality said Harrison was right. Command training valued doctrine. Combat experience valued results. Harrison didn't wait for response. Began organizing second group. Lieutenant Parker volunteered to lead. I want to verify this trail personally, Sergeant. Need to see it with my own eyes. Understood, sir. Compass, bearing 127. Follow the landmarks. Lightning Oak, Creek, Boulders. Can't miss them if you're on bearing. Second group departed at 6:40 p.m. Another 30 wounded. Another 60 bearers. Parker led. Mitchell had returned, would rest 20 minutes, then make second trip with third group. By 8 p.m., 2 groups were through. 60 wounded evacuated. 0 casualties. Meanwhile, Route Charlie convoy had attempted evacuation at 7 p.m., lost 2. More ambulances. 14 casualties. 8 dead. 6 wounded during evacuation operations. Word spread through American positions. Doc Harrison found a way out. Some trail through the forest. Not on maps. But it works. Other units requested information. Harrison refused. Trail capacity is limited. We overload it. Germans will notice the traffic pattern. This stays with 99th Division until we're clear. Soldiers began calling it Harrison's Highway, but Harrison knew the most dangerous part was still coming. Groups 5 through 8 would move during deepest darkness, when navigation became nearly impossible, when one wrong turn meant death for everyone. By 11:30 p.m. on December 18, 1944, 120 wounded soldiers had been evacuated through Harrison's Trail. 0 casualties during movement. 0 encounters with German forces. The impossible was becoming routine. But Harrison knew the mathematics. 120 evacuated meant 120 remaining, 4 more groups. The stretcher bearers were exhausted. Some had made 3 round trips. That was 16 miles carrying wounded soldiers through frozen forest in darkness. Several bearers had frostbite forming on fingers and toes. Others had pulled muscles, twisted ankles on hidden routes beneath snow. Nobody quit. Harrison organized the 5th group at 11:45 p.m. This group was different. These were the critically wounded. The soldiers who'd been triaged as immediate rather than delayed. Abdominal injuries, compound fractures, severe burns, third-degree frostbite, men who needed surgery, not forest trails. But surgery didn't exist here, and German forces were 2 miles away and advancing. The choice was risk or certainty. Risk the trail, or certainly die waiting for rescue that wouldn't come. Harrison selected the 30 most critical cases. Private First Class Michael Torres, with abdominal gunshot wound. Corporal Daniel Murphy, with compound femur fracture. Sergeant James Bradley, with severe burns across 40% of his body. 30 men who should be in hospitals, not on improvised stretchers in winter darkness. Harrison personally checked each stretcher, reinforced the frames, added extra padding from spare uniforms. He administered morphine to every wounded soldier, doses carefully calculated. Enough to manage pain, not enough to suppress respiration. He knelt beside Murphy. The corporal was 20 years old. Boston. His femur was shattered, bone fragments visible through torn muscle. The wound had been stabilized with splints and bandages, but moving him would be agony. "Corporal, I'm going to give you morphine. It'll help with the pain. But I need you to stay quiet during movement. German patrols are in these forests. Sound will compromise everyone." Murphy's face was pale, sweating despite the cold. "Doc, it hurts. God, it hurts." "I know, but you've made it this far. 8 more miles and you'll be in a real hospital, real surgeons, real medicine. Just hold on 8 more miles." Harrison administered the morphine. Watched Murphy's face relax slightly as the drug took effect. Did the same for 29 other critically wounded soldiers. At 11:53 p.m., he addressed the stretcher bearers. Bailey and Mitchell would lead this group. Robert Chen would provide rear security. Harrison himself would navigate. This group is critical cases. They're in pain. Some will cry out despite morphine. If that happens, we stop. We don't move until quiet is restored. German patrols will investigate sound. We encounter Germans, we have 2 choices. Fight or hide. Fighting compromises the trail for groups behind us. Hiding requires absolute silence from wounded soldiers in extreme pain. Neither option is good. So we prevent the situation entirely. Move slow. Move careful. No mistakes. Bailey checked his rifle. "What's our weapons posture?" "Defensive only. We shoot if we have no tome. Alternative. But shooting means the trail is compromised. Means groups 6, 7, and 8 will have no safe route. Means 120 men are stranded." "Understood. We're ghosts." The 5th group departed at midnight. 30 wounded soldiers, 60 stretcher bearers, 10 security. Harrison led. He moved by memory and dead reckoning, counted paces, felt the terrain through his boots. The compressed soil of the logging trail had a different texture than virgin forest floor, slightly harder, slightly smoother. He could feel the difference even through frozen ground. At 12:17 a.m., December 19th, they reached the lightning-struck oak, exactly where it should be. Harrison verified the landmark. Continued. The darkness was absolute. Cloud cover blocked starlight. No moon. Navigation was by compass and faith. Harrison trusted his pace count, trusted his terrain reading, trusted 32 years of his father's training. At 12:52 a.m., disaster struck. Stretcher-bearer Private Eddie Wilson stumbled on a hidden route. His foot caught. He fell forward. The stretcher carrying Corporal Murphy tilted, dropped. Murphy hit the ground. His shattered femur shifted. Bone fragments ground against each other. Murphy screamed. The sound echoed through frozen forest. High-pitched, agony-filled. Lasted 3 seconds before Wilson clamped a hand over Murphy's mouth. But 3 seconds was enough. Harrison heard German voices respond. Northwest, maybe 150 yards. A patrol investigating the sound. Everyone froze. 100 men became statues. Harrison's mind calculated distances, calculated timing. The Germans had heard a scream. They'd investigate. Standard patrol procedure. 4 to 6 soldiers. Systematic search pattern. They'd find the Americans in maybe 2 minutes. Bailey whispered, barely audible. "Doc, they're coming right at us." Harrison's training said, "Establish defensive perimeter. Prepare to engage." But gunfire would reveal their position to every German unit in the sector. Would compromise the trail. Would strand 120 wounded soldiers with no escape route. He made an impossible choice. Nobody moves. Don't breathe loud. Don't shift position. Absolute silence. He knelt beside Murphy. The corporal was crying, tears streaming down his face. Biting his lip to stay quiet, Harrison pulled out his morphine kit. Calculated dosage. This was more than regulation allowed. This was enough to suppress pain completely. Also enough to depress breathing. Risk respiratory failure. But if Murphy screamed again, everyone died. Harrison administered the injection, whispered directly into Murphy's ear. "I know it hurts. But our lives depend on your silence. Every man here. 60 stretcher bearers, 30 wounded. We all live or die based on whether you stay quiet. Can you do that?" Murphy nodded. The morphine was taking effect. His breathing slowed. Face relaxed. Pain fading into chemical. Haze. The German patrol approached. Harrison heard their voices clearly now. 4 soldiers. Speaking German. Standard search pattern. Spread out. Moving through the forest systematically. 1 German soldier passed within 20 yards of Harrison's position. Flashlight beam sweeping through trees. The beam passed over Harrison. Over Bailey. Over stretchers with wounded soldiers. Kept moving. The German wasn't seeing them. Because he wasn't expecting to see them. Human perception is expectation-driven. You find what you're looking for. Germans were looking for activity on roads, convoys, vehicle movement. Not silent statues in forest darkness. The patrol swept past. Continued northeast. Voices fading. Harrison waited. Counted to 300. 5 full minutes. Verified the Germans were gone. Only then did he signal movement. They lifted Murphy's stretcher carefully, continued down the trail. Murphy was unconscious now. The morphine dose Harrison had given him was enough to knock out a man twice his size. Necessary risk. Murphy's silence saved 99 lives. At 1:43 a.m., they reached the creek crossing. Ice was thicker now. Temperature had dropped. Probably 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Stretcher bearers' hands were numb. Several men had lost feeling in their feet, but they kept moving. At 2:17 a.m., the 5th group emerged at American lines. 507th Parachute Infantry positions. Sentries passed them through. Medical station received them. 150 wounded evacuated. 0 casualties during movement. Against all probability, Harrison's trail was working. But the margin between success and catastrophe had been 20 yards and absolute silence. Harrison knew their luck wouldn't hold forever. He radioed back to the clearing. 5th group through. 150 total evacuated. Preparing for 6th group. Major Kessler's voice responded. Harrison. Route Charlie convoy. Attempted evacuation at 0100 hours. Lost 3 more ambulances. 17 casualties. Your trail is officially the only viable evacuation route. Command authorizes continued operations. Harrison smiled slightly. The trail that didn't exist on maps was now officially authorized. Doctrine was catching up to reality. The 6th group departed at 2:45 a.m. Another 30 wounded. Less critical than Group 5, more critical than Groups 1 through 4. Mitchell led this group. He was exhausted. 4 round trips, 32 miles in 8 hours. But he refused to stop. These are my guys, Doc. I brought them through Normandy, through France, through 2 months of this forest. I'm bringing them home. The 6th group moved through darkness without incident. Reached American lines at 4:21 a.m. 180 wounded evacuated. The 7th Group departed at 4:38 a.m. Dawn was approaching. Sunrise at 6:32 a.m. They had less than 2 hours of darkness remaining. After that, visibility would increase. German patrols would be more active, more observant. Lieutenant Parker led the 7th Group. He'd made 2 trips already, understood the route, understood the risks. At 5:47 a.m., the 7th Group reached American lines. 210 wounded evacuated successfully. 30 remained. Harrison returned to the clearing for the final time. The sky was lightening. Dawn was maybe 40 minutes away. He was exhausted, hadn't slept in 36 hours. Frostbite forming on 3 fingers of his left hand. Dehydrated. Running on adrenaline and stubbornness. The 30 remaining wounded soldiers were the soldiers' doctrine called non-transportable. 2 severely wounded to move. 8 with spinal injuries requiring complete immobilization. 6 with severe head trauma. 11 with multiple traumatic amputations. 5 with critical abdominal wounds. Medical doctrine said these soldiers needed hospital beds, needed surgical theaters, needed equipment that didn't exist in forest clearings. Moving them violated every medical protocol, could cause additional injury, could kill them, but German forces were 1 mile away now. American positions were collapsing. Stay meant capture. Capture meant death. These soldiers were too wounded to survive prisoner of war camps. German medical resources were stretched thin. They weren't treating critically wounded American prisoners. They were leaving them to die. Harrison made custom stretchers, reinforced frames, triple layers of padding, extra tent poles for stability. He assigned 4 bearers per stretcher instead of 2, required twice as many men, reduced their speed, but necessary for soldiers this critically wounded. He checked each wounded soldier personally, administered morphine, secured bandages, verified immobilization, whispered assurances he wasn't certain he could keep. "We're going home, all of us. I didn't keep you alive for 8 months to leave you now." Major Kessler approached. His face was different now. Respect where anger had been earlier. "Sergeant, you've done the impossible. 210 men evacuated safely. But these last 30 won't make it. They're too critical. Save yourself and your men. You've earned it." Harrison looked at the major. "Sir, I became a medic because I couldn't stand watching people die when I could save them. These 30 soldiers are alive right now. As long as they're alive, they're my responsibility. I don't abandon my responsibility." Kessler nodded slowly. "Then God go with you, Doc." Harrison gathered his volunteers. Bailey, Mitchell, Chen, 24 others who'd made multiple trips. Men who were exhausted but refused to quit. Last run, 30 soldiers, most critical cases. Daylight coming. German patrols will be active. This is the most dangerous run. Anyone wants to stay behind, I understand. No judgment. Nobody stayed behind. At 6:02 a.m., December 19th, 1944, the final group departed. 120 men moving into dawn. Harrison led. Bailey took rear security. They moved into forest one last time. The trail was familiar now. Harrison had walked it 5 times. Could navigate by memory alone. Lightning Struck Oak appeared at 861 paces. Creek at 1,673 paces. Boulders at 2,451 paces. His dead reckoning was nearly perfect, but at 6:54 a.m., they heard German voices ahead. Multiple soldiers, maybe 10, using the trail. The Germans had discovered the route, had found the logging trail Americans were using, were patrolling it now. Harrison signaled halt. 120 men stopped. Critically wounded soldiers lay silent on stretchers. Some were unconscious from morphine. Some were conscious but too weak to make sound. Bailey moved forward, scouted the German position, returned, whispered to Harrison. 10 soldiers, maybe 50 yards, ahead, moving north on the trail, directly blocking our route. Harrison studied terrain on both sides of the trail. Dense undergrowth. Impassable for stretchers under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. We go around. Off trail. Through the forest. Doc. Wounded soldiers can't handle that terrain. Too rough. Then we make it less rough. Clear a path. Move slow. But we move. They left the logging trail. Entered virgin forest. Progress slowed dramatically. Bailey and Mitchell led. Broke branches. Cleared undergrowth. Created a path barely wide enough for stretchers. 40 yards in 15 minutes. But they bypassed the German patrol without detection. Rejoined the main trail at 7:32 a.m. Continued toward American lines. Daylight was full now. Visibility, unlimited. They were exposed. Vulnerable. At 7:51 a.m., one of the critically wounded soldiers went into shock. Private Carlos Rivera, abdominal wound. Internal bleeding that had been stable. Now unstable. Blood pressure dropping. Pulse rapid and weak. Harrison stopped the column. Treated Rivera on the trail. Started IV fluids. Applied pressure to bleeding. Administered plasma expander. 8 minutes of emergency medical care in hostile territory. But Rivera stabilized. The column continued. At 8:03 a.m., they heard American voices. 507th Parachute Infantry positions. 2 minutes later, the final group emerged from forest. All 30 critically wounded soldiers alive. All 240 wounded evacuated successfully over 8-hour operation. 0 casualties during evacuation movement. Harrison collapsed. Legs stopped working. Sat down hard on frozen ground. Medics rushed to him. Started treatment for exhaustion. Frostbite. Dehydration. Lieutenant Parker radioed Major Kessler. All 240 confirmed safe. Harrison did it. Every single soldier evacuated successfully. In the clearing 3 miles away, Major Kessler stood among empty stretchers and abandoned equipment. The aid station was empty now. All wounded soldiers gone. Evacuated through a trail that officially didn't exist 8 hours ago. Kessler picked up his radio. Called Regimental Headquarters. This is Kessler. Mission complete. All wounded evacuated. 0 losses during movement. Request commendation for Technical Sergeant William Harrison. He just rewrote the book on battlefield medicine. December 19th, 1944. 8:17 a.m. Harrison sat on frozen ground at the 507th Parachute Infantry Medical Station while a corpsman wrapped his frostbitten fingers. 3 fingers on his left hand. 2nd-degree frostbite. Would heal in 2 weeks with proper treatment. Small price for 240 lives. Major Kessler arrived by jeep at 9:32 a.m. He'd evacuated the aid station position after Harrison's final group departed. German forces overran the clearing at 7:15 a.m. If anyone had still been there, they'd be dead or captured now. Kessler found Harrison sitting against a pine tree, drinking coffee from a canteen cup. The major stood over him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "I was wrong, Sergeant." "You were right. I apologize." Harrison shook the offered hand. "You followed doctrine, sir. Doctrine is usually correct. Not this time. This time, a logger's son from Michigan knew better than West Point and the Army Medical Department combined. Just knew the terrain, sir. Trees don't lie." Kessler pulled out a small notebook. "I need your route documented. Other units are requesting information. We've got 3 more aid stations in similar situations. Cut off. German artillery interdicting standard evacuation routes. Your trail saved 240 lives. Could save hundreds more." Harrison described the route. Kessler took notes. Compass bearings. Landmarks. Trail width. Grade percentages. Capacity estimates. Everything needed to replicate the evacuation. How many times can this route be used before Germans interdict it? Harrison considered. Trail capacity is maybe 150 men per night, if you're careful. Germans know about it now, saw patrols on the trail this morning. They'll start watching it. Maybe 3 more nights before it becomes as dangerous as Route Charlie. 3 nights is better than nothing. We evacuate everyone we can before the window closes. Over the next 72 hours, 6 more American medical units used Harrison's trail. 480 additional wounded soldiers evacuated. 2 other medics scouted similar off-map routes, found old hunting paths, farm tracks, smuggler trails from before the war, routes that military engineers had dismissed as impassable. Evacuation casualty rates in the Ardennes sector dropped from 42% to 11% between December 19th and December 24th. The difference was medics who trusted terrain over maps, who understood that impassable meant can't move vehicles, not can't move soldiers, but the Germans adapted. By December 23rd, they were patrolling off-road routes, artillery observers watching for movement in forests, not just on roads. The advantage lasted 5 days, then it evaporated. 5 days was enough. Those 5 days saved an estimated 800 to 1,200 American lives. Soldiers who survived because one medic refused to follow doctrine. Harrison was transferred to rear areas December 24, 1944. Medical treatment for frostbite. 7 days of rest. Then back to duty with the 99th Infantry Division in January 1945. Major Kessler filed 2 reports. The first was operational, detailed Harrison's route, documented the successful evacuation, recommended similar off-map evacuation techniques for other units. That report went to Division Command, then to Corps, then to Army Medical Department, Headquarters. The second report was personal. Recommendation for Bronze Star with V device for valor. Citation read, Technical Sergeant William Harrison demonstrated exceptional initiative and courage during casualty evacuation operations December 18th through 19th, 1944. Despite direct orders to use designated evacuation routes, Sergeant Harrison identified and employed an alternate route through unmapped terrain. His actions resulted in successful evacuation of 240 wounded soldiers with 0 casualties during movement. His initiative and terrain knowledge saved lives when standard doctrine proved inadequate. The report didn't mention Harrison disobeyed orders, didn't mention the near mutiny. Some things were more important than regulation. Kessler buried the disobedience in the successful outcome. Harrison received the Bronze Star in February 1945. Small ceremony at division headquarters. General Walter Lauer pinned the medal on Harrison's uniform, shook his hand, said nothing about doctrine or disobedience. Just, "Well done, Sergeant." Harrison returned the medal to his pocket, went back to work, kept soldiers alive through 3 more months of combat. Germany surrendered May 8, 1945. Harrison had survived. German records captured after the war told the other side of the story. Intelligence reports from December 1944 noted American forces had changed evacuation procedures. Staff officers were confused. Why had Americans suddenly stopped using predictable routes? Why were they moving wounded through terrain German maps marked as impassable? One report from 7th German Army Headquarters dated December 22 stated, American medical units demonstrate tactical flexibility at small unit level, no longer constrained by doctrinal procedures. Utilizing terrain features our intelligence did not anticipate. Recommend increased patrol activity in forested areas. Standard road interdiction proving ineffective. Another report from an unnamed German medical officer, captured from personal diary. American medical personnel show remarkable dedication to wounded care. Their willingness to deviate from standard procedure to save lives demonstrates command initiative at non-commissioned officer level. This is a significant tactical advantage. Individual soldiers make decisions without waiting for higher authorization. We should study this approach. The Germans recognized what Harrison had proven. Rigid doctrine loses to flexible execution. Maps lose to terrain knowledge. Centralized planning loses to individual initiative. American Army Medical Department studied Harrison's evacuation. Post-war analysis published in 1946 concluded, initiative of individual medical personnel in identifying alternate evacuation routes during Battle of Bulge operations resulted in preservation of combat effectiveness across multiple divisions. Standard evacuation doctrine proved inadequate when enemy forces interdicted designated routes. Medical personnel who employed terrain-based route selection achieved significantly higher success rates. The analysis recommended doctrine changes. Field Manual 8-10, Medical Service, was revised in 1946. New section added. Tactical evacuation routes. When designated evacuation routes are compromised by enemy action, medical personnel are authorized to employ alternate routes based on terrain assessment and tactical situation. Route selection should prioritize wounded survival over doctrinal compliance. Harrison's civilian knowledge became official military doctrine. The logger's son from Michigan had rewritten Army regulations. But Harrison didn't care about doctrine or regulations. He cared about soldiers, about keeping them alive, about getting them home. He remained in the Army until June 1946, 15 months after Germany surrendered. Discharged at Fort Sheridan, Illinois. Rank: Technical Sergeant. Awards: Bronze Star with V device. Purple Heart for wounds, received January 1945. Combat Medical Badge. European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 4 Bronze Stars. World War II Victory Medal. He returned to Michigan. To Ironwood. To forests, he understood. Took a job with the U.S. Forest Service. Worked as a ranger for 37 years. Married Elizabeth Chen in 1947. Sister of Robert Chen, the forestry student who'd helped evacuate wounded through the trail. 3 children. Michael, born 1948. Sarah, born 1951. Thomas, born 1954. Harrison rarely discussed the war. When asked, he'd say, "I was a medic. Did my job. Came home." Didn't mention 240 lives saved. Didn't mention rewriting medical doctrine. Didn't mention the trail that wasn't supposed to exist. His children grew up hearing forest stories, not war stories. How to read terrain. How to identify trees by bark. How water moves through landscapes. How to find paths that maps don't show. The same lessons Harrison's father taught him. The same lessons that saved 240 soldiers in December 1944. Harrison died February 16, 1989. Age, 73. Lung disease. Exposure to smoke and chemicals during the war. His funeral was at Forest View Cemetery in Ironwood. Small service. Family mostly. Elizabeth. 3 children. 8 grandchildren. 17 other people attended. Soldiers Harrison didn't know were coming. Men who'd been wounded in the Ardennes. Men who'd been carried on stretchers through a logging trail in winter darkness. Men who'd lived because one medic trusted trees more than maps. James Mitchell came from Minnesota, 70 years old now, retired farmer. He'd been the corporal who led the first evacuation group. He stood at Harrison's grave and remembered December 18, 1944. Remembered being 23 years old and scared. Remembered following a medic into forest darkness. Remembered all 30 wounded soldiers in his group surviving. Robert Chen came from California, 66 years old. Retired professor of forestry at UC Berkeley. He'd been the private who verified landmarks on that first run. He brought a small pine seedling, planted it beside Harrison's grave. Doc Harrison taught me that forests are honest. They show you truth if you know how to look. This tree will remember him. Daniel Murphy came from Boston, 65 years old. The corporal with the shattered femur, the soldier who'd screamed in the forest, who'd compromised the column, who'd stayed silent after Harrison gave him enough morphine to stop a horse. Murphy's leg had healed. He walked with a slight limp, but he walked. He was alive. Murphy spoke at the graveside. Doc Harrison saved my life twice on December 18, 1944, first time when he refused to evacuate. Me on Route Charlie. That road would have killed me. Second time when I screamed and brought Germans down on us. Doc gave me morphine. Told me our lives depended on my silence. I believed him. We all lived because he made an impossible choice, gave me a dangerous dose of medication to save 99 other men. That's what medics do, make impossible choices. Doc Harrison made them better than anyone. 16 other soldiers stood silent. They didn't speak, didn't need to. They were there. That was enough. Harrison's obituary ran in the Ironwood Daily Globe. 200 words. Mentioned his 37 years with the Forest Service. Mentioned his wife and children. One sentence mentioned Army service. Harrison served in the U.S. Army during World War II as a medical corpsman with the 99th Infantry Division. Didn't mention 240 lives saved. Didn't mention the trail that changed doctrine. Didn't mention that he'd proven civilian knowledge could beat military planning. The newspaper didn't know. Harrison never told them. But the soldiers knew. The 17 men at his funeral. The 240 who lived. The 800 more who survived because other medics learned from Harrison's example. They knew. Harrison's Bronze Star and service records are displayed at the U.S. Army Medical Department Museum, Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Small exhibit. One display case. The medal. A photograph of Harrison in uniform, 1944. A copy of Major Kessler's recommendation. A map of the Ardennes sector, with Harrison's route marked in red ink. The display text reads, Technical Sergeant William Harrison, 99th Infantry Division, demonstrated that effective military medicine requires both doctrinal knowledge and individual initiative. During the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, Harrison employed an unmapped logging trail to evacuate 240 wounded soldiers when standard evacuation routes proved impassable. His actions resulted in 0 casualties during evacuation movement and established the principle that medical personnel must adapt procedures to tactical reality. Harrison's initiative saved lives and changed doctrine. The logging trail Harrison used was designated a historic site in 1994, 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. Belgian government placed a marker at the trail entrance, 3 miles southeast of the village of Butgenbach. Dense forest, same trees that were there in 1944. The trail is still visible if you know what to look for. Compressed soil, strategic clearing, subtle grade management. The marker is granite, 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide. Text in French, English, and German. December 1944. American forces evacuated wounded soldiers through this forest trail during the Battle of the Bulge. Technical Sergeant William Harrison identified this route when standard evacuation roads proved impassable. 240 wounded soldiers reached safety here. 0 casualties during movement. One medic refused to follow maps, followed the forest instead. The forest showed him truth. Every December 18th, small American flags appear at the marker, placed by unknown hands, probably descendants of the 240, probably people who understand that sometimes the best way to follow orders is to ignore them completely. Trees don't lie about where they'll let you pass. William Harrison understood that truth, trusted it, saved 240 lives because he knew forests better than any map could show. That's the story. Not about glory or medals. About a logger's son who became a medic, who watched too many soldiers die following doctrine, who finally said no, who trusted terrain over regulations, who saved lives by breaking rules. The Ardennes Forest still stands. The logging trail still exists. And somewhere in that forest, compressed soil still marks the path that wasn't supposed to be there. The path that saved 240 lives when everything else failed. Harrison's Highway. The trail one medic found by refusing to believe maps tell the whole truth.